Maimer from Shabbos Parshas Matas Masay Mevorch Machodesh Menachem of Tavshin Yud Beis. Daber Hashem al Moshe Leimer, and Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, "V'akritem lachem Arim, you should prepare for you, or you should assign or designate for you cities. Arim Miklat Yanu lachem, there'll be cities of refuge for you. V'nasham B'ritzeach, and over there a murderer shall run away to Makin Nefesh B'Shgag, someone that kills a person unintentionally by mistake." It's brought down the Medrash Rabbah on that pasuk. That's what the pasuk says. Toiv v'yosher Hashem, that Hashem is good and straight. Al kain yoydech hatoyim b'adarech. Therefore, He will direct sinners on the way. In other words, instead of getting rid of the sinners, He will direct them on a way that will save them. This is what David HaMelech said in Tehillim. Remember your mercies, Hashem, and your kindness, because they've been always there. They've been there from the beginning of creation, like the Medrash is going to go on to explain. The intention behind what David HaMelech said, when Adam HaRishon sinned with the Eitz Hadas, and Hashem told him, the day that you will eat from the Eitz Hadas, you will surely pass away. Despite that, he lived for 930 years. And instead, he had to go to exile, similar to the murderer that murders unintentionally. He was chased out of Gan Eden, he was kicked out of Gan Eden. It's like cities of refuge. In both cases, you're leaving your place of residence and you have to go out into exile. Excuse me. Like someone that murders unintentionally. And what was the great kindness of Hashem? The sin of the Eitz Hadas was an intentional sin, and therefore it shouldn't have been just merely exile should have been his punishment, but rather because the kindness and the compassion of the Eibishter judged him and gave out his punishment as if he was an unintentional sinner. This is what David HaMelech said. Remember your kindness, Hashem, and your compassion, Hashem, and your kindness is because they've always been there from the beginning of the world. At the time of the creation of the world, the sin of the Eitz Hadas was at the beginning of creation. Then there was the mercy and the kindness of above. That's what it means that they were constantly there. They were from the beginning of the world. So now from this entire Medrash, that the Medrash compares and says, Adam HaRishon was supposed to pass away. Instead of passing away, he went to exile. And the same thing by us, that there's someone that kills someone else unintentionally, which he goes to exile as well, and the Eibishter made a kindness for Adam HaRishon that his even though he should have had the death penalty, he instead was just judged with exile. But from this comparison between the Chet Eitz Hadas and killing a person, who bedugmas heilig nefesh, so we see that it's something that the Chet Eitz Hadas is similar to killing someone. Rather, just because the kindness and the compassion of the Eibishter, they judged him not like an intentional murderer, because if he killed someone unintentionally. So the Rebbe is going to want to understand why is the idea of sin or the sin of the Eitz Hadas compared at all to the idea of murder. To be able to understand the connection. between the sin of the Eitz Hadas to someone that murders. It's brought down in the Arizal's L'Kutei Torah, not to be confused with the Alter Rebbe's L'Kutei Torah. Chassidus is brought down. Chassidus al pasuk shofar dama adam ba'adam, on the pasuk where it says that the blood of man spilled by man. Why does it have to say twice man? There's different midrashim, different Amar Chazal that explain it. But al Chassidus, it explains there's two Adams. There's Adam of Kedusha, that's Adam Elyon, that's the supernal man of the Eibishter, the level of the Estes Spheres, the Oiris and the Kalim. They're likened to a man, just like a man down here has Seichel and Midas, intellect and emotions. So therefore, there's Adam Elyon as well. And then there is Adam Blial. There's a pasuk calls him Adam Blial, a wicked person. In other words, there's the Adam of Klippa. And when we're talking about Shofar Dama Adam, but Adam, that means actually not Bi Adam, by a person, but Bi Adam in the person. We are pouring out the blood of Adam Elyon into the person, into the Adam of Klippa. Let's see it inside. When a person does an Aveda. Now, what is the meaning of the word Aveda according to Chassidus? Through an Aveda, he crosses over from the domain of the Eibishter to the domain of Klippa. That's what the meaning of Aveda is in the word crossing over. He doesn't only cross over himself, but he's also mavir something else, also from the word Aveda. He's bringing something, he's bringing baggage along with him as well. He crosses over and brings along with him the chayis of Kedusha to the domain of Klippa. So Aveda is both the person is crossing over, and Aveda can also be extended to the chayis alaki that he is making cross with him, that he's making it go to the level of Klippa as well. Adam the Kedusha, he's pouring out the blood of the man. Who is the man referring to? The man of Kedusha, Adam Elyon, the Esespheres, like Rasul explained. Bit Adam in the person, that's the Adam Blial, Adam the Lumazeh, the Adam of the other side. And the Rebbe brings another pasuk that Al Chassidus indicates this idea. Like it says in the pasuk, V'noikiv Shem Havaya. The simple meaning is he explicitly states Shem Yud Kei Vavke, and he curses it. That's the simple meaning, the Pshutishal Mikra V'noikiv Shem Havaya. But if you literally translate the word Noikev, Noikev is from the word Nekev, a puncture, a hole. So a person, through his Avedis, so this explains, makes a hole, makes a puncture to Shem Yud Kei Vavke. Shem Havaya Hua Oir K'Moshe Meir B'Kelim. Shem Yud Kei Vavke is a light, the way it shines in vessels. By Dei Haveda Hu Oiser Nekev B'Kli, and through an Aveda, he makes a puncture in the vessel. What happens then? Just like when you make a puncture in any vessel that contains things in it. So whatever is in there pours out and falls out of the vessel. The same thing, Kaviyachol and Shem Havaya, where there's the Oir Alaki that's in the Kelim Vatzils. And a person through an Aveda punctures it, therefore, V'nimshach b'meila chayis l'makom haklippa is then automatically the chayis, the life force, the vitality, it's in Shem Yud Kei Vavke, that the person through his Aveda punctured it, flows out to a place of klippas. It's interesting the way the Rebbe adds the word b'meila. It's like an automatic thing. It's not like you have to do something. As soon as you puncture the keli, as soon as you make v'noikiv Shem Havaya, the chayis goes into klippa. Now, all of this is by Avedas Bechlal, it says. He brings it from the L'Kutei Torah of the Arizal and Aveda in general, not specifically the Cheta Eitz Hadas. But the Rebbe extends it, just like it's in every individual and specific sin, which is what the Arizal was talking about over there. So too, it's in the sin of the Eitz Hadas that we know the Chet Eitz Hadas is the root and the source for all sins. The Chol Chatoim Shorshim Chet Eitz Hadas, all the sins The root is from the sin of the Eitz Hadas. And this punishment of death that was for the sin of the Eitz Hadas, the punishment is not just for Adam Rishon, but it's for all generations following. In other words, the concept of death in this world came about because of the Chet Eitz Hadas. Just like the Chet Eitz Hadas is the source for all Avedas, the same thing. The fact that the Chet Eitz Hadas causes death, it's not just that it caused the death of Adam Rishon, which ultimately happened after 930 years, but also it was geyser death upon all other people throughout the history of the world, except for four that says that they, or maybe even those four, but upon them, the death for all time came as a result of the death of Adam Rishon. The same thing, sins of all time is a result of the sin of Eitz Hadas. So he says, just like all the other sins, it causes that energy and vitality of Kedusha comes into the world of Klippim, through the sin of the Eitz Hadas, Nimshach Chayis HaKedusha LeKlippos comes down, the Chayis of Kedusha to Klippos. V'avsha Klippos nivro v'nishav. Though the Klippos were created and were brought into being, they already have life and vitality because they were created. It's not that the person does the Aveda, he's now creating the Klippos. The Klippos already existed before the person created. What came something new through the Chet Eitz Hadas. So the Rebbe is going to give a very interesting insight into the function of Klippa before the Chet Eitz Hadas versus after the Chet Eitz Hadas, and how we, if you will, add and increase to it. Usually the answer in Chassidus that's given to this is very dry and simple, that there was the basic chayas of Klippa, which it was created with initially, for it just to survive, so there should be able to be Bechira Chavshis, so it should exist. And then when a Yid Chas V'Shalom does an Aveda, so then we add additional chayas. But here in this Maimer, he's going to explain it a little bit deeper, the function of Klippa before the Chet Eitz Hadas, how that changed by the person, what the Klippa now affects the person after the Chet Eitz Hadas, and so on. 4 lines from the bottom end of the line. The idea behind this is that Klippa is the Klippa is the way they are from the perspective of the creation. It's just like the name, what it's called. It's called a peel, a shell. What's the function of a peel? What's the function of a shell? The function of a shell is not something evil. It's not something bad. It's not something cruel or whatever. A peel and a shell's function and purpose, the reason why it's there is to protect the fruit that's inside the shell, to protect the food that's inside the peel. So the same thing, the idea of klip is the way they are from the perspective of the creation. Before a human being got mixed into it and added chayis to it, but the way Hashem created klippas. Hashem created klippas in a very benign way, in a very, if you will, beneficial way. Not only are the klippas not there to oppose or to conceal and cover over unholiness, despite us calling it a shell and a covering and a peel. Kim adraber, just the opposite. By being a peel, by being a shell, they actually act as a protection for the kedusha. Next page. Just like physically, in the growth of a fruit, in the blossoming, in the growth of a fruit, in the kedesha so that a fruit should be able to grow well, and then should come the time when it's ripe and it should be ready and be able to be eaten. So the chli klippah shemer saprium again. There needs to be first the shell, there needs to be the peel, up until it's ready to be eaten, that protects and guards and makes sure that the fruit that's inside doesn't get somehow spoiled and ruined, etc. So therefore, In this function, the peel is not something that it's an opposition to the fruit. It protects the fruit and shields it, etc. Just to give a very simplistic example, you see, let's say, armed guards in front of, let's say, I don't know, in front of the White House. Nobody's going to say that the armed guards are there somehow. They're armed, they have weapons, etc., etc. They're somehow a bad thing. They are there for the benefit of those that are in the White House. They are there to protect and to guard and to make sure that whatever and whoever's in the White House doesn't get hurt, etc. So in other words, the armed guards are there in service of and for the benefit of those that are inside. The same thing, a peel and a shell of a fruit is there to protect. The same thing, klippa beruchnis is there to protect. Now the Rebbe is going to explain what does that mean in our avodah, this concept of how can we look and see klippa as being the spiritual idea of klippa as being something that protects. So it says, 3 lines from the top, so too it's in the service of the Eibishter. The Bascholos avodah, tzarich lias yeshes k'tzas. At the beginning, at the onset of a person's service to Hashem, there has to be a little bit of ego. Like the expression is the Masechta Soita, who Ashminis, Shebeshminis, the Gemara and Soita derives from a pasuk, or not from a pasuk, the Chazal say over there, that there has to be at least an eighth of a small measure of ego. So the Rebbe applies that at the beginning of Avodah. Why is this necessary at the beginning of Avodah? And this is crucial. It's at the beginning of Avodah, just like a shell and a peel is outside of the fruit. It's not during the avodah. Just like when you're eating the fruit and you have peels mixed up with the nuts that you're eating, it's very annoying. Or peels mixed up with the egg that you're eating, it's disgusting. That's not when you're supposed to have the peel. The peel is outside, before, at the beginning of the avodah. The betchilas avodah at the beginning of the avodah. Asher Adam beloved Hashem Yisbarach, when the Eibishter comes to serve when the person comes to serve the Eibishter, the Eitzahara tries to dissuade him from his avodah, and he tells him, "Mi ani u'ma ani she'eved Hashem Yisbarach. Who am I? What am I? I should serve the Eibishter." That's the complaint and the trickery of the Eitzahara, the evil inclination that he tells him. As da handelt sich wegen avodas Hashem Yisbarach Melch Malch Havlach Baruch Hu. We're dealing here with serving the Eibishter, the King of Kings, the Eibishter. And you know your state and situation. You know who you are. You know what you are. And the Yitzhahara tries to convince him, how are you able and who are you to approach to serve the Eibishter? Now let's examine what the idea of avodah is. Through avodah, we are increasing kaviyachol Hashem's power. I am going to increase Hashem's power. Where do we see that avodah increases Hashem's power? Now that the power of Adonai should become increased, through our avodah becomes an increase in the power of above. And the flip side of that is by the head that avodah, through the lack of avodah matishin, we weaken the power of above. Like it's brought on the Medrash on the pasuk that the rock that has borne you is teshi. What does it mean, teshi? From the word hatoshas koyach. It's man she'ein Yisrael loisim retzoyim shel makim kaviyachol. It's man she'ein Yisrael loisim retzoyim shel makim. At a time when you do not do and fulfill the will of the Eibishter, kaviyachol, so to speak, matishin koyach shel maila. They are weakening the power of above. That's what it means. So teshi. The word teshi is from the word hatoshas koyach, the weakening of the power. So there's the two sides of the coin. When I do avodah, I'm increasing Hashem's koyach. I'm adding to Hashem's koyach. And when I chas v'shalom do the opposite, so then I weaken. And therefore, the Yetzer Hara tells him, "Who are you? You are such a big guy." Well, it's always telling the Yetzer Hara this. The Yetzer Hara complains. You know your situation. You know your state. How could you even think that with your service you will affect anything? Therefore, at the beginning of the avoid has to be a little bit ego. The person should not become affected by Yetzer Hara, and he should serve the Eibishter. So this is what's important, that he should have that ego. That's like the clip on the outside. Before he gets to the avodah itself, when he's approaching the avodah, he needs yeshus, which is really klippa, but it's a good klippa. It's a klippa that serves the fruit, that causes him to do the avodah, that protects him from the Yetzer Hara, dissuading him from doing the avodah. Not only doesn't it have yeshus, this ego not only doesn't it oppose the service of the Eibishter, just the opposite is it assists and helps the person avoid them. So too the clippers were at the beginning of their creation, prior to the Chet Eitzadas. Not only were they not in opposition to holiness, and not only did they not conceal and cover over unholiness, just the opposite. They were like a klippah that protects the fruit. What occurred through the Chet Eitzadas? The Chet Eitzadas now brought about that the klippos are now in opposition to holiness. Any question?
It has to be just a small amount, because otherwise person will feel they're self-righteous, holy roller, holier than thou.
That it has to be, exactly. That's why we used before the term shminis shebeshminis, an eighth of an eighth, which is the Gemara describes a very small measurement, and of that very small measurement, you need 1/64th. An eighth of an eighth is 1/64th of that small measurement called an uchla. Okay, further on page 262.
Sorry, quick question, right, Bart? So can we say, because I don't know if we can extend it to that point, but because Adam Arishon didn't have that feeling, maybe he felt, who am I, whatever, that's why he fell through. Maybe had he have this, it would have it would have prevented him from eating.
That's an interesting thing, but it's an interesting take on all of this, and I would say it's a geschmacke word. It's a good word to use by Chassidus Verbrengen. Though it seems from other places that there's a Hayom Yom about this and so on, that Adam Arishon the word Adam was written with a big aleph in Divrei Hayamim, that Adam Arishon's problem was not his he was too humble. It seems to be, and over here you say a different problem with Adam Arishon. In other places, seems to be the problem with Adam Arishon was he didn't have the appropriate humility that he needed. But it's a geschmack of art nonetheless. I wouldn't totally dismiss it out of hand. I don't recall this idea of being brought down in other places, but maybe. Okay, the power that the klippos have to conceal and to oppose kedusha, because through the chet becomes an intermingling, a mixture of good and bad. Before the sin of the Eitzadas, there was not an intermingling, there was no mixture of good and bad. The klippos were not in the same location, quote unquote, as kedusha. Since before the Chet Eitzadas, the purpose of the klippah was just to protect kedusha. So any protection The protection is on the border. The protection is outside of the protected thing, just like the klippa is. It's not inside the fruit. It's not inside the egg. It's not inside the nut. The klippa is outside of it. And it stands between the fruit and whatever is outside. And the protection is between the fruit and what's outside of the fruit. It's just like physically out of klippa, even the klippa is outside of the fruit. It's not in the place of the fruit itself. It's only between the fruit and what's outside of the fruit to be able to protect the fruit from whatever is outside. In the place of the fruit itself, there is no klippa. So too, it's also when the klippa is there only during the growth of the fruit. When the fruit is growing, that's when we have the klippa over there. So that the growth should be good, so it should be ready and able to be eaten. But afterwards, when you eat the fruit, we throw away the klippa. We don't want pieces of peels mixed in, like we mentioned before. It interferes. We remove the klippa and get it out and get it away from us. Since its purpose is to protect the matter that it's protecting, it's not found in the matter itself. Rather, it's found between the item and what's outside of the item. So too, it's in the service of Hashem. That when do we have this klippa? We have it only at the beginning of the avodah. Before one begins the avodah, when the Yetzer Hara is trying to dissuade the person says, no, I am able to do this. I am a Yid, I'm the Eibishter's son, the Eibishter chose me, I can do this. But while the person's in the avodah, or after he did the avodah, there's no room for the klippa. So it's in the service of Hashem. The ego that has to be by the avodah is only at the beginning of the avodah. At the beginning of the avodah, then it's possible that the Yetzer Hara should oppose with a complaint by saying, who am I and what am I? Oh, so then we said we have to have the ego. To protect on the avodah from the Yetzer Hara that he should not oppose the avodah. But afterwards, while he's in the middle of his avodah, until he reaches such a state of avodah where it says that he found his heart. You found, Eibishter found his heart trusted and faithful before you. It's like the level that David HaMelech said about himself, that my heart is empty within me. Then he's not concerned about the opposition of the Yetzer Hara. Then there should not be the idea of ego. This means since the idea of ego is to be able to protect the avodah from those things that oppose the service of the Eibishter. Therefore, its place is not in the place of the service. Rather, it belongs between the avodah and the Yetzer Hara that opposes the avodah. But in the avodah itself, there is no yeshus over there whatsoever. We'll stop over here and continue tomorrow how this is also by klippus in general, but taruvas. Any questions?